Hello and welcome. I'm Merritt Sheridan, and today I'm going to talk about how to manage holiday stress. It's mid-October, so the time to start the conversation is now. It's coming. What I've done is put together a worksheet that you can also download and print out, which I would recommend because it's going to give you an opportunity to kind of write down specific things that you can do to help manage any holiday stress. And we're going to do that through what I call the 3 Bs for holidays on your terms. The 3 Bs are beliefs, boundaries, and behaviors. So let's just go ahead and get started. Beliefs are everything, so choose wisely. Okay. Whatever you believe really drives everything. It drives what you think, it drives how you then feel, and it drives your behaviors. Okay. So, what I've seen a lot is if someone had a bad holiday at one time, then what happens is that narrative gets set. Okay, well, this holiday was terrible last year, so it's going to be terrible this year, right? And the anniversaries can be very difficult because it's hard sometimes not to associate a bad experience with that day, but it's just a day. It's just a 24-hour period. And what you bring to that 24-hour period makes all the difference, right? So if you say, the holidays are going to suck, they're probably going to suck, right? Because how you interpret the world and how you filter it is how you experience it. And when you've had a negative experience, that tends to stick, which is how the brain works. And I remember it was 1980. My sister and brother and I was 10, right? And so we're little kids, and our family tradition was that on Christmas Eve, we got to open one gift. And so we each grabbed our little gift, and we were sitting at the little coffee table there, and all we could hear from our parents' bedroom was a fight of all fights. They were just going at each other. It was awful, right? And we're sitting there and we're sitting there and we're just kind of hoping they get over it and come out and remember that it's Christmas Eve. And they didn't, And me being sort of the sassy middle child, I'm like, well, I'm going to go sort this out. So I go on over and I pound on their door and we want to open our gift. And it was, well, we'll get there when we get there, go wait for us. So go back and, the thing is, eventually they came, but I don't remember that. I don't remember the gift. I don't remember any joy. What do I remember from 40 years ago was how awful that felt, right? Now, I can take that and say, well, Christmas Eve is always going to suck now because it always sucked. But then I would be setting myself up for a lifetime of that whole day, evening, holiday sucking just because of one bad experience, right? And it was bad, don't get me wrong. And we want to honor that. We want to honor our experiences, our negative, painful experiences, right? But the distinction between pain and suffering is acceptance, right? If I can't accept that that happened, I keep wanting to push it down and essentially recreate it, hold on to it because I'm not accepting it, then my pain becomes suffering rather than saying, yeah, that really sucked. It was a bad situation and it hurt, right? But when I can do that, I can move forward. The next year can be different and will be different, right? And the truth is, I never know what's actually going to happen. No, none of us do, right? So we want to set our intentions. We want our beliefs to reflect what we want to get out of that, right? And that can be hard, especially if you have had a history of bad things happening and sort of getting, I think I've seen this a lot where people kind of get stuck, the holidays suck. Well, if you think that, that's what you're going to get out of it, and then it expands to the holidays. I mean, that's like, a quarter of our lives, right? This holiday season, right? So, you want to be watching any negative sort of core beliefs you have about the holidays, because as long as you hold on to those, that's what you're going to get. Okay. Change is hard, so, okay, Merritt, I get that. What do I do? Well, how do I change that, right? I think one of the best ways to do it is actually to see what other people do that you want and mimic that, right? Okay, and maybe it's not the most, there's also the opposite people that just, I love the holidays. Oh my God, it's the best time of year. Blah, blah, blah. And, maybe that's a stretch, right? But find your place. Find really what you want for the holiday season, right? Maybe it's just kind of neutral. Maybe it's neither negative or positive. Fine, start there. Doesn't matter, right? It's just a day. You get to make the meaning you want to make out of it. But we are meaning making machines. We can't not make meaning out of things, and beliefs are everything. So choose wisely. Okay. And no one can tell you what to believe. You get to decide that, right? And you want to learn from the past but not live in it. So if you've had those negative experiences, particularly, and I mean, people have loved ones pass away on holidays, right? Ouch, ouch, right? How do you get through that day year after year without honoring that? Well, you don't. And you do honor it. You absolutely honor it. And you make space for new experiences, and you make space for joy and celebration, because those two things can actually occur together. Okay. So the first page here on the worksheet does have a space for you. What beliefs do you have about the holidays, and how does it affect you? And so any negative beliefs, I should probably put that in there. So, start examining, what negative beliefs that you do have about the holidays, so that, and how that affects you. Really important, right? Because if it doesn't affect you, move on. Okay. But probably it does. And that's the first part of this, is just kind of understanding where you're at with your belief system about the holidays. Okay. Next, be boundaries. Okay. So what do we do about it, right? Well, we start setting healthy boundaries. Any healthy relationship has healthy boundaries and healthy communication. That's for another video. Okay. So what does this look like? Well, this is really important. This is why I want you to write them down, because if there's a particular person or people that are sort of, triggers for your stress, those are the people you want to be prepared and that you're going to engage with. Those are the people you want to be sort of thinking about and preparing for. How are you going to engage with them differently this year, right? And, I say this somewhat in jest, but oftentimes holidays we spend with family, which are sometimes people we don't otherwise spend a lot of time with, right? There's a whole narrative around family and obligation during the holidays. And if you're lucky and your family's fantastic, yay. If you're not, then you want to also kind of start thinking about how much time you do want to spend with family, even on the holidays, right? You get to decide how much time and space you share with any particular person, right? And everything in between, and so, and maybe there's just one particular person, right? So maybe, maybe Aunt Susie is kind of a negative Nelly, right? And you just, when you walk in and you see her, you're going to feel that negative energy, and you just don't want that, right? And so, okay, so how are we going to set a boundary with Susie, right? What have you done in the past? Kind of take a look at that. And keeping in mind that with boundaries and communication, there are 4 basic communication styles, which are passive aggressive, passive aggressive, and assertive. Passive disrespects you. Aggressive, disrespects the other. Passive aggressive disrespects everybody, and assertive respects everybody. Okay. So in this example with negative, maybe should I call her Nancy, negative Nancy, Aunt Nancy. A way to set a healthy boundary with her is going to be in an assertive way, right? In a way that respects you and her. And it might look something like, well, let me go through all 4 of them, see if I can come up with an example. So passive might be, you walk in and you just sort of succumb to her negative energy, and she's, the soup is too cold, and it's too hot in here, and or whatever, just meh, meh, meh. And a passive approach would be, yes, it does. You just sort of go with her, even though you don't want to. And you're like, yeah, this soup is cold. Huh? This sucks. Meh, 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 right. So that would be passive. You just sort of do what she's doing, right? Aggressive would be, all right, Susie, the soup's fine. Get over it. We're tired of your negativity. Okay, well, that's not going to go very well. It's not like science. When you hit negativity with negativity psychologically, you just get more negativity, right? It's just salt in the wound. It doesn't solve anything. Okay. Passive aggressive might be, well, it would be sort of like doing what I did in the beginning. Yeah, this sucks, brr, 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 but then behind Susie's back, now you're going, oh my gosh, she's so negative. I can't, right? What are we doing? That's passive aggressive, right? And that disrespects everybody. Assertive would be, I would actually set the tone with someone like Susie, right? I'd walk in first and say, Susie, it's so lovely to see you, or excuse me, Nancy, Susie, Nancy. Happy holidays, and start off with that positive, respectful, maybe, you've heard something about her year and, I hope that went well, or, give her some sort of compliment and, set the tone that you want. Oops. And hopefully, sometimes people like that will mirror you for a moment or two until they get pulled into their, negativity, which is fine. You accept that. You accept Nancy is who she is, right? You don't go in there trying to change her or fix her or scold her. You just go, okay, Nancy is this way. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be respectful. And this, as soon as she goes into that negativity space, I'm going to respectfully go get some cider, right? I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to remove myself from that negative space and I'm going to go somewhere else that brings me joy. Okay. Simple. Well, simple in theory, I should say. Easier said than done. Fair enough. But you see, you're not fighting it. You're not fixing it. You're just simply honoring the space that you want and you're being respectful to Nancy. Another good sort of boundary technique that I like in these situations is, let's say like if politics comes up, right, which nowadays is kind of touchy for people, right? And so, if a topic like that comes up and there's, friction and it's getting negative, one thing I like to do is just divert the conversation into something that everybody can be less charged about. Okay. How about them Niners? Which in my family is fine because we're all Niner fans, but I get that sports can also be a trigger. So, pick a topic in your environment where, think about it this way. Try not to focus on what a relationship or relationships can't be and aren't. Rather focus on what they can be and are, right? And this is just a really important one for any relationship that's less than ideal, let's put it that way. As it starts to go into those places where there's a lot of conflict or negativity and, wanting that person to be other than they are, and them wanting to be you to be other than who you are, find that common ground, find that thing that you agree on and go there. Okay. Okay, let's see. If you don't set a boundary, you passively agree to let the other person intrude on it. Very true. That would be kind of like that passive style or even that passive aggressive style. And you take your power, you take their power away when you take your energy away. So that's that example I gave with Susie. As her negativity goes up, you remove yourself. She has no power anymore with you, right? You've taken that away from her by changing your energy, right? And that's not disrespecting her. That's respecting you and her. Because frankly, if you engage with her in that negative space, you're certainly not helping you, and you're really not helping Nancy, because anyone who feeds into that is just fueling that for her, and that actually doesn't serve her either. Okay, and the question here is, what boundaries do you need to set during the holidays? So pretty straightforward. So write them down, get them on the list, because let me tell you, when you actually get to that place, like, let's say it's your child at home, right? I mean, your neural patterns are set, right? You're going to have all this stuff written out and ready to go, and then you walk through that door and it's like, oh, I'm 10 again, right? Or wherever it may be. But whenever you're in a family dynamic or a what's a dynamic that you've been in a long time, it's hard to change. But we start by writing it down and having it ready, and at least it's like a fire drill, right? You plan it, you practice, and then whatever happens is going to happen, but you're much more likely to be able to set a boundary and change a behavior, like we're going to talk about next, if you've thought about it, set that intention. Okay. And you know what? The first time it's going to be awkward and weird, and it's not going to be perfect, and that's fine, right? But it's a step in the right direction, right? Behaviors. So behaviors, boundaries often are behaviors, so there's that overlap. But behaviors are different as well. And behaviors in this context can look like recognizing that you do want something to change, figuring out what that change is, and then setting that into motion. So for example, maybe maybe you host a particular holiday every year because you always have, and you're like, I kind of just don't want to host this year, right? Like something like that, right? But it's always been that way. And ooh, what happens if I put this out there, if I ask for something different? Well, I can tell you one of three things is going to happen. There's going to be acceptance, rejection, or counter. That's it. Those are the three options, right? So be prepared for those, right? Most importantly, be prepared to get what you want, right? People may actually say yes, and if you're like me, that's been a struggle for me. It's been hard for me to ask for what I want. And I'm a work in progress, but I'll never get what I want if I don't ask for it. And as I'm learning this and as I do this, I will get acceptance. And when I get acceptance, I move in that direction. I will get rejection. And when I get rejection, I move away from that. Right. That person is telling me, no, it's not going to work. So I move away from that. And then I will get counter. And counter is great because counter is a place for growth and negotiation, right? Where, what you want and what the other person want may be in conflict. That's okay. So you work together to find that common ground, right? And that's a really beautiful thing in relationship because, the thing about, well, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but, the reverse of not asking for what you want is always wanting things your way. And you know what the cost of that is? The cost of always wanting things and doing things your way is loneliness, isn't it? Right? It's loneliness. You can't be in a relationship with one person getting their way all the time, right? You have to learn to negotiate, right? And negotiate is very different from sacrifice. And that's an important distinction too. If you're always sacrificing, that's not healthy. Okay. Negotiating, common ground, right? Sometimes you give and sometimes you get. All good stuff. Okay. Managing your own feelings, owning your own feelings. That's a behavior, right? Based on how you're feeling, making sure that you be respectful, kind of along the lines of that assertive communication, trying not to get sucked into old routines. And when your behavior changes, your experience changes. As you make these changes in your behavior, the world starts to treat you differently, right? Oh, so-and-so, they asked to not host this year. That's different. Oh my goodness, right? And also with that acceptance, rejection, encountering, it's actually really helpful because you're going to find out where let's say in that example, you say, hey, I don't want to host anymore. One family member is absolutely, my gosh, you've done it all these years. I'll do it. That's nice. That's healthy, right? Another family, well, how dare you? It's tradition and it's always been this way. And I'm going to be very upset if we don't have it at your house. Okay. Good information, right? Which family member do you feel more comfortable and safe with? Right? It's not about changing them, but it's about, like I said, when there's acceptance, you move toward that. Where there's rejection, it's a bit of a wall. Doesn't mean it can't be worked on, but it's good data and it's reason to sort of pause and figure out any maybe next steps with that person, right? Okay, and then questions on this page. What behaviors can you change in dealing with difficult people or situations? So again, you want to get real specific there. And how would changing these behaviors change your experience? You know, this is a really important question, is why I even do all this, right? How will you know when you've succeeded, right? What, I talk about a lot about defining and designing the life that you want and deserve to live. Okay. So let's take the holidays and maybe just even one holiday this year, excuse me. And that's going to be your starting point. Define and design the holiday that you want this year. How will you know you've achieved it? How will you know you've been successful? What will it look like, right? Because you need that sort of end point to start defining and designing it to then help you come back to these step-by-step ways in order to get there, right? A ladder has rungs. You don't just go from bottom to top, step, 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 but you got to know where you're headed. Okay. So what does an ideal holiday season look like for you? Start there. And look, you shoot here to get here, right? So I'm not saying define it and design it and it's going to work out beautifully, but I'm saying if you don't define it and design it, you're just going to get whatever you get, right? Without setting that intention, right? Because your intentions are a reflection of those beliefs that we kind of started this conversation out. So you have those beliefs, you set those intentions, you get as clear as you can, and then you set the boundaries and you change the behaviors and have a holiday season on your terms. Okay. Hope that's helpful. I will be also doing some videos on each of the threes: beliefs, boundaries, and behaviors in depth, because, well, they're so complex. I can talk about them forever and ever and ever. But this video is kind of in the context of holidays, so I hope that's helpful. And but yeah, be on the lookout for other videos on the 3Bs specifically, where I'll go into more depth. And you can always find me at shareit.withmerit.com.